Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is my custom vintage mini bike. Today, we're going to lift up the gas tanks to improve the flow to the carburetor, and we're going to make and install a custom seat. I guess the first part to this is going to be finding a piece of wood to build a base off of, and then we'll just go from there. Oh yeah, there's this box too from Sam's Garage. We should check that out first. Before we do any of that technical stuff though, I'm dying to see what's inside this box from Sam's Garage. Well, I definitely wrapped it very well. Weapon of some destruction. All right. You guys know what this is? It's like there's something else in here too. Oh boy! Sam! You're the man! I thought this was just going to be seat foam. I gotta open this up, guys. Sam told me he put fart spray in this box. He got me. Look at that. Hope you have a wonderful Christmas and a happy New Year's. Thanks for your friendship and support. Sam's Garage. Wow. That's really cool, man. Thanks, guys. I use these exact impact drivers. I actually probably have some kicking around. So that is just super awesome. I haven't had one break yet, and I've put these things through some abuse. Thanks, man. It looks like somebody knows what I've been up to. Been starting to work on my heads and such. Porting and trying to polish and such. But a lot of times I don't know exactly which bit to use, and I don't have them in front of me. So I'll ask guys, hey, what do you use for this? What do you use for that? I think we pretty much have them all now. Wow. Merry Christmas. Thanks, Sam's Garage. Let's see what we got here. Ooh. Believe it or not, that was actually a pretty expensive, really nice sheet of plywood at one time. Yep, we'll use that. Of course, the pan on the chassis is not square. That would be convenient. We also have this little thing right here. Other than that, nothing's really in our way. So, at our widest, about 7.5 inches. So, yeah. I can work with that. I'm gonna rip a piece, 7.5, instead of trying to, you know, hold that up and trace it like some kind of barbarian. Live and learn, guys. I might as well go over this too. Because of the way I'm running the grain of the wood, I'm gonna have my length all day long. So, where I know I'm gonna be dealing with something up here, right? And that's about 2 inches. The total on this thing is almost 18 inches. I'm going to cut a piece at 20. So I'll make my rip and then chop a 20 off it. There's our 7.5. And that'll get you 20. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. I'll show you how I did that in a second. But we got the rip. It was long. I came in with a pen, a nice point to it. Traced up underneath. Was quickly made aware that this is not an equilateral shape. This is from 1971, so however they punched this thing out, okay, that's the shape they got. This was all handmade stuff, alright? Made in America. Made to last, though. So, I got my piece traced out, cut, and then I took off all of the rough edges, all of the square edges, anything that could cause damage to our seat material when we finally get to use it. That acorn looking mark right there is where I'm going to make room for that hump right there. Whoop, there it is. I just got Big Herc on the job. Flapper wheel makes quick time with this wood. The same flapper wheel method is what I used to make our clearance. And now I'm just making sure that when I push down, everything feels pretty flat. It's going to flex a little bit, but you want it to pretty much be right there. Now that I know that's going to work out and I'm within all of my parameters, I'm going to take it back with my grinder and give myself a little bit of room. That way our material isn't overhanging a lot when we're done, you know what I mean? This is just the base. Finish is going to be, you know, so to make it happen. Okay. That's not too bad. You can work with making that look good, I think. Okay, the next part is going to be 4 holes. So I'm going to try to avoid any of the old ones that are there. We'll just leave those for, having something possibly original on the bike, I guess. So they're going to be somewhere like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'm probably going to use these 2 and then just find 2 more up here somewhere. Yep. Before any of these holes are drilled or any decisions are made, the minor drawback at this point is that the engine now has to come out of the frame. So, not the biggest deal. We take our throttle cable off here. I left this section of fuel line long, so turn the valve off. We'll clip it, put that aside, and other than that, take the motor off. Over here, I want to take the guard off and do the header anyway, so it's really not that big a deal. Part of the process, guys. There's the engine, and here is what we have to work with. So now, we drill these holes, and we go to put our hardware in, we just have nothing in our way. And we're going to get the best bang for our buck this way, I guess. So, now I'll figure out where the holes go, mark them out, and drill them in the wood first. As long as the ones I drill in the wood don't line up with any of these, we'll be good. I was going to use these ones in the back, but they're kind of a pain to get a straight hole when you're drilling through to make it look nice. I got plenty of cyborg meat out here. I could even keep them in a little bit. I got some big fasteners. I just eyeballed my holes. They're gonna be like right here, and there, and there. I'm going to clamp this down, or at least hold it down. Better yet, I can make it even easier. I'll start with one hole. I'll drill a pilot, and then once the pilot is set, I'll use another bit. I'll ream it out a little bit until it's just big enough for whatever size hardware I have sitting around, and I'll push it through. Then I'll find like this hole up here, right? That'll be diagonal from that one, but if I set that and set a pin, then everything should be square. Then I'll put my other 2 holes, just the pilots. I could take everything off and drill the holes out to whatever desired size I want. That's how I'm going to do it. So I'll start right here. In case you understood what I was explaining less than I did myself, what I did was drill the pilot through this X and through the seat pan. I'm now going to make this hole bigger and this hole bigger, just so that I could fit a pin like this through both holes, and that will hold it in line with that one point. Then we'll work off of that. There's the pin in the hole. Sorry about the glare. And here is the hole that's diagonal from that. So put the pilot right through it. Now I can take something, I can drill this out more, right? And then put something through there, and then that'll hold this right where it needs to be. Then I'll drill my other two holes. I'm now using screws for my pins. These are nice and long and come all the way through. So you drill your pilot, your first hole, so that it goes all the way through, and then I pull it to the side, expand the hole, and then expand this hole, put it back, put the pin through, and do that for all of them. The last one, where we have 3 pins in, you should be able to just drill right through. Now every hole has something in it. You give it a shake. It feels like I have uniform play in every direction. So these holes are going to line up. Now we have to figure out how big the holes in the wood have to be. So these pins and stuff, we're all done with those. These are T-nuts. This was a fairly decent sized one. I wanted something that I wasn't going to mess around with in these big sausage fingers. The hardware that goes with these is nice and substantial. The name of the game is that you drill holes in your wood that these cylinders can just barely sleeve through. Alright, you want them pretty snug. And then with a hammer, you tap in those big fangs on there. Okay? And those grip into the wood. So those go on from the top side down. That way when your hardware goes in and it's threaded and tightened up, it's pulling the fang tangs right back down into the lumber. It's like an anchor. So we now need 4 holes big enough for that threaded cylinder. Drilled my 4 holes. I already have these 2 set. You just push them in place so that they're nice and level, and set them with the hammer. And by bigger, I don't mean like the next size up either. Just a little wiggle room. That way, it makes things easier on us. Alright, I just started threading one of my bolts through to make sure everything's going to work, which it will. Now we need those same bolts to have the ability to pass through the seat pan or chassis, and that is what's going to hold everything together. These go up against the washer, through the metal, right into the seat. That pulls downward as you thread up, right, as you tighten the bolt. It comes up through this hole and pulls these anchors down into the wood. That's what holds everything in place. So that's why it's important that everything's nice and straight. We're going to make these holes just slightly bigger than these bolts. That way, when we're putting them in, if there's any discrepancies, it will be easier to just line things up and bolt it down. And by the time you tighten all four of them down, it's going to sit straight anyway. Now that the guff factor is pretty low with the mini bike itself, I'm going to go ahead and move it aside. I'm going to clean up my area and get everything I need right out in front of me. I've never done this before, and honestly, the neater you can make things the first time, the better your chances. At least you won't feel overwhelmed. Sam sent me a few different materials. This red one is sort of a vinyl pleather, but it's nice and thick and durable. That's going to be our first layer. I'm going to use a little bit of a quick set floor adhesive I have. I'm going to put it on very, very thin and attempt to stick this piece of material onto the base of the seat. I just put a very thin layer of my adhesive on the back of my material, and probably even thinner on the wood itself. I'm going to flip this onto that and go from there. With the piece of wood in place, I'm going to try to put a little bit of this adhesive along the edge of my wood. That way I can fold this down, bring it around, and then staple it, I guess, to the wood. Okay, I'm bringing it up and around one of my edges, trying to keep it nice and tight, and just setting a few staples. This part's going to get a little messy. I'm just going to keep cleaning my hands. I've worked with this stuff before on flooring, and once you get it stuck to your glove sticks to everything. So I can pull my hand away. I'm going to push with this hand, pull the material with the other hand, do whatever it takes. I'll fold it up. I'll staple this side. After that, I'll go back and do my ends. I just removed a little bit of the material from the ends. That way, when I fold this in and staple it down, it's not really like bunching up a lot. Not too bad. You're not going to see any of this stuff. This is all going to be like that. You know what I mean? So I'm going to find my holes and cut those out with a razor blade and just kind of work my material down nice and tight as it's drying. Let that glue do its thing. I went ahead and put some new staples along the edge and then cut my material back and remove the first set of staples. Just kind of tighten things up a little bit. This is where that weird pleat thing was. This material is going to be under another piece, so I think we can let that be. No reason to just keep throwing staples at it. It's not going to fix it. I'm going to be using this foam that Sam sent me as well. But I also want to take a look at what treasures lie beneath. Just going to grab a razor blade and make an incision along the side of this thing so I don't cut up any of the wholesome goodness waiting for us below. Well, it's just about exploding at the seams after I made the incision. Don't expect much. This thing looks like it was saved from some sort of a dumpster fire. But on the inside, it looks like we have some kind of rolled foam insulation. Nothing hazardous. And I'm not sure what this is, but that might be some sort of real deal seat foam. I'm going to investigate a little further. Oh, it seems as if this plastic bag and duct tape sarcophagus did everything it needed to do, because whatever this is, it's very well preserved and very much usable. It has some kind of a handle, so I'm assuming it was to float, or some kind of an insert for a bottom of a drawer or something, maybe. Not sure, but that is really good stuff. Even this, which I thought was just office carpeting, has some sort of foam below it. Maybe these guys were onto something. The base is shot, so you might as well get in there. Alright. It's been long enough. I let it sit there for about 45 minutes, an hour. It's not completely dry. This stuff's not going to be completely dry until tomorrow if I bring it inside overnight. And even then it might take a few hours. So this is the bottom, this is the top, this is the base that we're going to be working off of. We have 3 different foams. We have this nice firm one. We have one that's not too dense, but it will provide a layer of comfort. And then we have these ones here. I think they're the same. I'm just going to cut one off of this short piece, I think. Alright, our first layer is going to be this foam. It has a flat side on it. That side's going to go against our red vinyl. Where it's not quite long enough, I'll cut a chunk off of here and stick it next to it. Adhesive here, adhesive there. Nice and light. Alright, this is all adhered. Okay, it's not stuck down, but the glue's there. It'll eventually dry. Right now it's going to keep the foam from moving around too much. I'm going to take my scissors and trim my edges so that nothing's hanging over. Alright, I just trimmed off the corners so that it's not bunching up. Cut the edges back. The next layer, we're going to use some of that foam that Sam sent us. I'm actually going to need another section of this. The reason being, it's not flat. Alright? So, in order to make a square, you take two pieces opposite, right? So it's like two triangles opposite. You stack them together, it makes a square. So, I figured out one piece. I'll hold that one here on this bigger piece and just cut the same one out again. That way I'm not wasting all the other material. There you go. Now just have to figure out a length and cut those. So whatever length this is. This glue situation really isn't cutting the mustard. So I got another idea. It'll help us with this stuff. I just cut off a piece of plastic sheeting. I'm going to try and wrap and somewhat compress all of these foams together and affix them to this. I wish I had a cheap roll of saran wrap. Oh well, I'll make it happen. I'm going to try to do this with the base and everything. That way, once I wrap this around and pull it snug, I can just staple it to that base for now. That'll be cool. That layer is pretty much holding things in place, but I'd like to see a little more compression. As soon as I pick it up off of this, poof, it'll release. I'm going to take this loaf of bread and roll it in a longer piece. I'm only going to go as far as I have to, and then I'll staple off the bottom down there. Alright guys, I wish I could say that was easy. Content under pressure. Destination Stapleville. Alright, we have arrived. I'm going to try to hem these ends up. You can see I used that entire length, and I'm 230 pounds, probably 240, fully clothed, and it took all of my considerable bulk and effort to get this compressed to where it looks something like a seat. Now we're going to be able to get a little bit tighter But first thing I'm gonna have to do is trim these ends off. This ain't no Tootsie Roll. Here it is, with my ends pulled in tight, stapled, and trimmed off. I took a screwdriver, poked out my holes for my bolts. Next, we gotta wrap this thing in material. And you know there's nothing better than black alligator skin leather. Also, thanks to Sam's Garage. I'm going to have to lay a piece out, figure out which direction I want to go, and get to snipping. Basically, something more manageable. The seat is only going to go one way with the fabric because we're going to be folding this in. So it's going to be going like that, right? However, there's one more thing I think I can do to prevent my sides from deforming when this plastic finally starts to stretch and wear in after some time. Since we're already going to be using alligator skin, I might as well bust out the Guerrilla tape. What I'm doing is going around and trying to pull the foam into a somewhat symmetrical shape. It's not easy, so it might not look fantastic, but once I have this all wrapped and tight and where it needs to be, it's going to make the next step that much easier. Okay, so it took a little more than I anticipated. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. At least now I have that half round shape that, say, a cafe racer bike seat would have. So now we can wrap it with that alligator skin. I know this method isn't very traditional, but it is functional. With our two membranes that are now on here, chances are this isn't going to get water in it. This Gorilla Tape probably isn't going to tear. And if our pleather skin does, we can take it off and replace it without worrying about having to do all of that again. It might not be the most comfortable seat, but it's a seat, and this is going to last a very long time. I'm going to get to folding this in. I'm not sure if I'm going to do the side and then the front, or the front and then the side. It's going to be whatever looks best at this point. Well, the only thing I could do was have one fold showing on the side, and I was able to hide the front one underneath that one, so we only have 4 instead of 8 showing. I'm just going to go and pull everything tight and staple this up. I stayed away from my holes So, it is what it is, guys. This thing is going to be a lot better than sitting on metal. I didn't hold back much. I just kind of stapled it like I was running some sort of a stitch line. Tried to get any place things might come apart. It might not be beautiful, but I made it. I'm proud of it. And it's very rugged. It should match this bike well. I grab my hardware. I'm gonna mount this thing right up. No more of that stuff. Well, before I explain to you why that didn't work, I'm going to introduce you to Plan B. This is another base cut pretty much exactly the same. It's not rounded as much on the edges because it doesn't have to be. I want it to look square because this is going to go underneath the seat. These holes that you see that don't go all the way through are going to be for our screws that hold this into the other plate. There's a few bigger holes, 4 of them. We're going to be switching to a stud method. So we're going to try to use carriage bolts. The idea here, if the carriage bolts give us guff, we take out all the screws, drop the plate off, we're right back in there. So I'm just burning a little bit of that high gloss stuff that we don't need kicking around. I'll put a couple coats on. Kind of cold. Well, I guess I have some other explaining to do. Like, why is there a handle welded in the middle of my frame? Well, that's not a handle. That is going to be the new dual gas tank mount. My idea is I'm trying to raise my tanks, which will raise my line and better feed the carburetor without getting into a fuel pump. This intake is already busy enough. The other issue I have is most of the pulse fittings are on top of the valve cover. Now we could do one on the side, but then we're going to lose our vent. So we can move that somewhere. You see what I'm saying? We're chasing things. We would be into another fitting down here, which would get into another manifold, and I think that's it. So, not to mention, you know, top plate or a location for the pump and all the other fun that goes with that. Once the seat goes on and the tanks are there, it's not going to look like the world's worst nut shot. So, what happened with the seat, everything lined up except that T-nut right there decided to spin on me. It got stuck in there. It was connected to the chassis. So I had to get under there with the flat bar and reef on things and really work it, and in the process ended up screwing up another one. I got frustrated, walked away from it, figured this out, and now we're going to take another approach with the seat. I'm not going to throw this out. This thing is perfect for this bike. I like the way it feels, and when I'm finished, we're going to be right up here. I'm going to go check on that board outside. Well, the wood isn't dry yet, so I'm going to go ahead and install my gas tanks. So it's going to be exactly the same as before. The only difference, I trimmed a couple inches off of this. I was going to let it hang out over the ends and yada yada, but there's not a whole lot to hold it on, right? And if we squeeze here and put the tanks on, I don't want the rubber to just like flare out at the end and look any sleazier than it has to. So we're just going to keep, being progressive and helping the situation, not making it any worse. I know it looks like a suitcase with wheels, but it's not. Much, much cooler. Let me get those tanks on. Alright. I just about have my tanks mounted and plumbed in all the way to my shutoff. I'm going to clean up my mess and get ready to put this seat on. This won't look quite as ridiculous once it's in place. Alright, this is going to be dry enough to assemble anyway. So, all of the small holes, those are going to be for these screws. Those are going to hold the panel on to the bottom. These are carriage bolts. These go in from the other side. They'll go through, and then those get sandwiched in here. They'll stick out the bottom like studs. I'll get back to you when I get that far. Well, we're learning after all, so here you are. Carriage bolts are in, coming out the bottom like studs. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it on the bottom of the base of the seat. Get everything lined up. Then I'm going to start putting my screws in. It's pretty close right there. I'm going to start putting my screws in. I'll put one in the front and a couple in the back. Take it over to the mini bike. We'll test fit it. Well, I forgot to notch for this new gas tank lift. So I'm peeling back the material on my seat, alright? And I'm going to have to cut the wood that's underneath all of this glory. So I'll cut some out with a knife, figure out what I gotta take out, I'll get it, and then I'll do my best to squeeze the foam in and make something that's gonna look kinda cool. Real easy. Peeled it back, made my notch, and then I used the old knife, cut the edges of my foam, but not, that part of it. So it'll fold down like that, and I'm just gonna wrap some Gorilla Tape around all this, seal it back up, and then I'll pull my seat material back down over, get everything tight, throw some staples in it, and then we'll just put a simple notch in that. Should clean everything right up, get us where we need to be. So here we are, one more time. All my screws are filled in. And my studs are coming out the bottom nice and straight. That's the front. That's the back. Let's put this thing on. It's a little tricky to get it on. The studs sit so straight that you have to push the nose right up tight against the rail and bring it down straight into the holes. Once you're there, everything relaxes just enough where it's barely touching and it falls into place. I'm going to be putting my hardware on the seat as well as tightening up these tanks. And then we'll take a closer look. Here's what the seat looks like. All tightened down. Nice and neat. The nut, lock washer, and a washer on all 4 bolts. Alright, the tank is all tightened down. I have that plumbing ready to go. If you're wondering, this tube here is now 3 inches higher than this one here. So in doing that, we've lifted our feed substantially. Hopefully, that's going to help our carburetor. Here is the view when you're sitting on the bike. When you turn the bars, it will eventually hit, but that's a very sharp turn. The seat is pretty firm, which I like. Overall, this feels really good. When you put your legs up, you're not anywhere near the gas tank. I'm still going to have to install the motor and all the guards before we make that final cut and put those covers on. We'll get to all of that and a whole lot more in the final assembly. Because as always, it's a work in progress. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.